Welcome to a new week with the Electric Trucker. This week I'm traveling with my truck to Liverpool, and in preparation, the truck received this warning placard, which is something you need when transporting hazardous materials. They're used to display a hazard symbol sticker showing what kind of dangerous goods are being transported. That way, firefighters or anyone else can immediately see what's on board. The same placard is also mounted on the rear of the trailer. I'm now picking up some life rafts about 100 kilometers away and head straight back here. These life rafts are headed to Liverpool. I was doing some research on those new warning placard because I don't have my Hazmat certificate yet, but I learned a few things. There are those red warning signs I've got on the truck now, which already indicate the transport of hazardous materials. Then there are the signs with numbers on them, which is only used when the cargo is all the same hazardous material. In that case, it gives emergency services precise info on what's being transported and how to handle it in case of an accident. That's typically the case with tankers or bulk material, where it's always the same substance. For mixed cargo, like what I'm hauling in this trailer, the details need to be identified through the vehicle or freight documents, which are handed over to the fire department if needed. There are also those diamond-shaped hazard symbols that show the specific type of danger. There's also something called the 1,000-point rule. Each hazardous substance has a code, and when you multiply that with the quantity, you get a point value. As long as it stays under 1,000 points, you don't need a certificate, and usually not even the red placards. But you really can't generalize any of this. It all depends on the exact cargo and setup. There's one more thing I wanted to share with you. I'm always super honest about everything, including my personal life. And I think this is actually relevant to road safety in general. Yesterday I drove 900 kilometers from Mühldorf to Leer, but at one point, I glanced at my phone and sent a message, which, of course, you shouldn't do. And right then, the police drove by. And I thought that's going to be expensive. 1 point on your license and a €130 fine. They pulled me over and I figured, why beat around the bush? That just makes everything more complicated. If you break the rules, you should own up to it and take responsibility. So that's what I did. I immediately admitted it. Then the officer asked what I do for a living, and I told him I'm a truck driver. That was embarrassing. He stepped away for a moment, came back, and said, because I was honest and cooperative, he'd just issue a warning. That means a €50 fine, but no point on my license. And that's a great reminder that honesty and being friendly can go a long way. The officers were polite, the situation was clear, and in the end, it turned out okay. I definitely won't be using my phone behind the wheel again, especially since my Ioniq doesn't have a proper phone mount. The truck's setup is a bit more user-friendly in that sense. And I noticed something where I actually caused a bit of damage. When hooking up the trailer, I usually lower the truck quite a bit. Since I started driving forklifts, I always make sure the trailer sits perfectly level and not tilted. So I lowered the truck all the way down. Turns out when you go that low, the wheel arch starts to rub slightly. I figured a bit of rubbing isn't a big deal, but now it's gotten bad enough that I actually damaged the wheel arch trim. This trim is easy to remove, so it's not a major issue, but still it's something I should avoid. Lesson learned. And we added new outlets for the forklift. One is currently being used for the AdBlue tank, and the one on the right is for the forklift. I think using a standard Schuko outlet makes things a bit more flexible, because a blue CE socket isn't compatible with everything. You can also see the IP protection ratings, IP44 when a plug is inserted, and IP55 when it's closed. If I remember correctly, the first digit stands for protection against dust or other foreign objects. The higher the number, the better the protection. If it's a 6, it's dust tight. The second digit is for water protection, like resistance to splashes or sprays. And I think if the second number is a 9, you can even go at it with a pressure washer. Life as an electric trucker is definitely full of surprises, and right now Krumelix is not doing well. I already took him to the vet yesterday because he was super sensitive around his belly and lower back and even had a fever. He got some antibiotics because the X-ray showed a possible intestinal torsion. We had another scan today, and thankfully the twisting has reduced significantly, and the fever is almost gone. But the best news is that no surgery is needed. That's a huge relief because intestinal twists are no joke. I had one myself a few years ago, and that was no fun at all. They always say pets and owners are alike, and I guess in this case it's kind of true. Before I'm heading out to Britain, I've got a little assignment doing some local deliveries with the Volvo FL Electric. It's a compact 7.5-ton truck, super small cab, just 2 seats, and a box body in the back with a tail lift. It's my first time driving this little guy. Driving mode is selected right here on the dashboard. Super straightforward. There's even a reverse camera, which I honestly wish I had in my truck. Tons of visibility, big windows all around, and especially that low window in the door is a game changer in city traffic. The dashboard's pretty simple. On the left, there's a power gauge showing how much energy you're using or recovering via region braking. On the right, speed. Below that is the air pressure for the brake system. And bottom left is a classic analog battery level gauge. You turn the cruise control on via the dashboard and then use the buttons, left to set the speed, right to increase it. No adaptive cruise control though. The display shows both the estimated range, 355 kilometers, and the battery state of charge, which is currently at 98%. It also shows the remaining energy in the battery, which is 203 kilowatt hours. You can flip through the menu to check various stats: outside temperature, 24-volt system voltage, battery energy content, air pressure, and current consumption. The cab is narrower and a bit more aerodynamic, but you're still pushing a brick through the wind. I haven't figured out yet how to adjust the regen braking, but it does some light regen when you lift off the throttle. I always find it interesting to test vehicles like this and see how intuitive they are to use. In logistics, you're often just handed a truck and expected to drive right away, so it's important that drivers can quickly get the hang of it. It seems like the truck's regen is set up so that it does a bit of recharging on its own, and then when you apply the brake, it activates the regen more strongly before the actual brake kicks in. So you can't do any smooth coasting, but for a beginner, it's probably a good setup. It seems like the truck has a custom transmission with only 2 gears. In other Volvo electric vehicles, you can see the specific gear number switching, like from 9 to 12, but this one only goes from 1 to 2. I think the range of 247 kilometers is a bit optimistic, but probably realistic for city driving. I just picked up stickers. There's a sticker company here, and these are small stickers to show that the charging stations or trucks were subsidized. We already have them on our trucks, but these ones are different. The trucks were previously funded solely by the federal government or the Ministry for Digital and Transport, whereas now the European Union has also contributed. It might be that the funding is now split between them, so that needs to be reflected on the stickers as well. And I've got to say, this is a really cool truck. Especially in city traffic, an electric 7.5-ton truck just makes total sense. Super efficient, lots of regeneration, and it doesn't annoy people because it's quiet and doesn't stink. That's exactly what you want. Long-distance driving is a different story, but the other electric trucks are proving that it works. But with a regular diesel 7.5-ton truck, you could easily drive across Germany without having to stop. For the electric version, the battery capacity is always optimized for city use to save resources and money, which means you lose a bit of flexibility. But for us, it works really well. We collect the goods and pallets in local traffic, and then do the long haul with the big electric trucks. When I started today, the display showed 207 kilowatt hours, and now it's showing 147. So it used 60 kilowatt hours to cover 70 kilometers, which comes out to around 0.86 kilowatt hours per kilometer. Not super low, but it was cold and included some highway driving. Volvos are usually charged on the right side, but this FL Electric charges on the left. It looks like it supports AC charging too. The label at least seems to suggest that. And you can see the big battery pack mounted on the left side, but there's nothing in the back. I guess it can be configured with 4 battery packs. There's another one further up, and then there's empty space where another could go. So there's definitely room for more capacity. But the way it's currently set up, it's perfectly fine for urban use. From this point on, it gets a bit sad because I'm traveling alone. Krumlix isn't with me anymore. I just dropped him off at a dog boarding facility because you're only allowed to bring dogs into England on certain approved travel routes. The Eurotunnel is one of them, and you can also take a ferry from Calais. But since I'm going from Cuxhaven to Immingham, dogs aren't allowed on that route. I'm relieved I was able to organize something last minute, but up until now, Krumlix has always come along on every trip. So he has to stay here this time, but he's in good hands. The adventure begins. The truck is fully charged, and the timing was super tight. I couldn't have managed the dog on top of everything. I'm loaded with the life rafts and also a special frame for a transport I'll be doing on the way back. The ferry departs at 5 in the morning tomorrow, and it takes 22 hours to Immingham. I haven't downloaded a single app yet, but I've done a bit of research. I'll probably use the downtime this evening on German soil to figure out which charging apps work best. Of course, there are the usual suspects like Ionity or Shell Recharge, which will probably get me through, but I want to use the cheaper apps if possible. And there are always people who complain about digital cockpits, but they really do have their advantages. In the UK, you drive in miles per hour, And here you can just go into the settings, switch the units to US, and suddenly you've got the range and speed in miles. My trip is off to a not-so-nice start. I wanted to top up the battery at these 2 Shell recharge stations on my way to the ferry, but the chargers suddenly showed up as unavailable in the app, even though they were showing as available just earlier. I tried using the RFID card and nothing happened. Same when plugging in directly. I called support, but they couldn't do anything either. No remote restart or anything. And despite all of that, the charger was still showing green. Sometimes this stuff is baffling. Normally, when a charging station goes offline temporarily, they've got a whitelist stored locally. That means cards that are usually authorized can still start a session as a fallback, but not here. I really like how Ionity handles it. If the fault is on their side and charging doesn't work, then the customer shouldn't suffer and electricity should be free. With a truck that gets expensive, but the reputation damage is way worse. Shell Recharge doesn't have that many stations to begin with, but if someone shows up and it doesn't work, they won't come here again. If they offered free charging in cases like this, it could actually push the topic of reliability higher up within the company. Because then the finance team would start asking, why are we giving away so much electricity? And that could lead to some actually productive internal conversations. There is another charger at the other end of the town, but I don't want to find out if the ferry has some strict cut-off time for boarding. That happened to me once in Morocco. We decided to do a quick top-up before the ferry and showed up 60 minutes before departure. It was way too late and we had to take the next one. And from Immingham to Liverpool, it's 138 miles, just over 200 kilometers. That's doable on my current charge. I'll just find a charger somewhere in the UK if I really need it. No unnecessary risks. Let's get on the ship and figure it out later. I'm now at the harbor and I actually had to put on the customs seal because I'm transporting light hazardous goods. The life rafts contain detonators, which puts them in the lightest category of hazardous materials. And only 5 trucks are going on this ship. Most people leave their trailers here at the harbor and they're either transferred or just the containers get shipped. It's not that common for truck drivers to travel on the ship, so it feels kind of special. Such a huge ship for just 5 truck drivers. And here are the other trucks I'll be traveling with. One has a big boat, the other a large crane. I'm guessing they're connected, with the crane being used to lift the boat into the water. I have to apply more stickers now. It's like a high-security transport, but apparently it's really important. With these hazardous material signs, people might think I'm hauling a load of explosives, but really it's just life rafts. I mean, I'm actually increasing the safety on the ship. The truck is secured, and now I have to log that I'm on the ferry because there's a special ferry regulation. You get 1 hour to drive onto the ferry and 1 hour to drive off, and during that time, you're legally allowed to interrupt your 11-hour rest break. And this is my home for the next 24 hours. I have a huge bed, and there's even a second fold-down bed with a ladder so 2 people could sleep here. Still more luxurious than the truck. There's a small chair and a table, power outlets, and even a phone. Over here is a closet you can open up to store your stuff. And a bathroom. Pretty simple, but it does the job. It's just before 3, and I'm going to lie down for a bit. It sounds like I'm not allowed to go back to the truck, so I packed as much as I could into my backpack. Being on this ship is a really unique experience. And I even met a fellow lorry driver from the UK, Mike. He explained a bunch of things I need to know when driving over there. And honestly, it doesn't sound too bad. For example, there's no Sunday driving ban, but you almost always have to pay at rest stops. Free parking is pretty much non-existent. He also told me that he transports hazardous goods too, and that's why many drivers take this specific ferry. You're not allowed to bring hazardous materials on passenger ferries, and this one is purely for commercial use. And currently, only 6 or 7 drivers are along for the ride, and they only have space for 12, so it feels pretty special. And the food's decent too. They even made a vegetarian option. But the best part about the ship? No internet. It's a nice detox and very relaxing. Normally, I'd be glued to my phone, researching more, but here I can't. So I'm just reading my books. I've made it out of the port. It's 0 degrees Celsius, and I've already picked out a charging station 55 miles away. And at this hour, it should be empty at the chargers. And my contact at Iveco casually mentioned that there's no support for this vehicle in the UK, so let's hope I'm not having any issues while I'm here. According to the sat-nav, the speed limit is now 50 miles per hour, which is around 80 kilometers per hour, but earlier it even showed 60, so apparently trucks here can go up to 100 kilometers per hour. And a quick note on how I prepared. I downloaded the UK maps offline for TomTom and also for Google Maps. Then I installed Electroverse, which is pretty well represented here in the UK, and the other is OvoCharge, which used to be called Bonnet. Those are the best EMP roaming apps, so you can access different charging networks across the UK. I'm headed to a grid-served charging hub. They're a premium charging operator building out big 350 kilowatt DC charging parks, but they don't support roaming, so you can only pay on-site with a credit card. They also have their own app, but you can't download it with a German Google account. I've seen that with other apps abroad too, as if they don't want foreigners using them. My first charging session in the UK is running. It was a bit tricky to start though. Since I couldn't download the app the regular way, I downloaded the APK file online. But that version is outdated and wouldn't let me add a credit card. So I checked again for roaming partners, and it turns out ChargeNow is one of them, but at a crazy high price, and in the end, it didn't even work. Then I authorized the session locally with my credit card, which worked fine. The truck is now charging at 298 kilowatts. The battery was ice cold after the sea journey, where temperatures were down to minus 10 degrees Celsius. Even after driving for an hour, it hadn't warmed up, which probably limits the charging rate a bit. One question with direct payment is always how do you get the receipt? But GridServe's got that covered. You just scan the QR code, enter the last digits of your card, and you'll get a receipt for the session. But it's super expensive. Charging costs me 79 pence per kilowatt hour, and that's a standard rate in the UK. Sometimes you might find something for 60 or 70 pence, but it's rarely cheaper. And if you use roaming cards, it gets even more expensive. But this charge should easily get me to Liverpool. I'll top up to around 80% and then hit the road. I could have pulled in here with the trailer too. The UK isn't as strict as France, so it's a bit easier to manage. And honestly, the country isn't that big. You don't have to charge that often. When I drove through France and Spain, the distances were massive. Here, one full battery can take you coast to coast. Almost every tractor unit here in the UK is a 3-axle configuration. I'm guessing they're allowed to haul more than 40 tons here, and with just one rear axle, that quickly becomes a limiting factor. So having a third axle helps distribute the load better. I wasn't aware that this setup was so common in the UK. That's actually an important detail when it comes to electric trucks because the space you'd normally use for the extra axle is exactly where the battery pack goes. I haven't seen a European-style electric truck with 3 axles that still fits within standard dimensions. I'm curious to see how manufacturers will tackle that in the future. Anyway, that charging stop earlier was crucial, and now the most important part of the week is done. I'm not going all the way to the port either, just to a depot in Liverpool, and they'll take it from there and deliver to the port themselves. And it's kind of funny switching from the metric system to imperial here. Speed is in miles per hour and even miles per kilowatt hour. Totally messes with your head at first. At least kilowatt hours themselves are still the same unit. The trailer is unloaded, cleaned up and left in good shape. And the company was super nice. I even got a coffee. So why did I have to transport them here? Turns out they're all assigned to individual ferries. So you can't just use any life raft on any ship. They need to be the exact ones allocated to that vessel. And that's why they sometimes need to be moved around like this. There have been some last-minute changes to the return trip, but it looks like nothing's going to happen over the weekend. I found a secured lot near the docks, close to the harbour, where I can park the truck. Since I was one of the first to arrive, I managed to snag a good space. Looks like most of the spots are rented long-term, and people will probably show up bit by bit, but a few visitors like me are allowed to park here too. The plan is to stay here for 2 nights, and then head out on Sunday to get closer to the loading point, ready to go Monday morning. Now I'm going to pack my backpack and walk into the city center. Most important thing is that the expensive truck is parked somewhere safe. I'm now in Liverpool. It took about an hour and a half to walk here, but it's good to stay healthy. And when I'm in a big city, I try to immerse myself in the culture. That's why I chose to stay at a hostel, so I could meet new people right away. If I stayed in the truck for 2 days, it would be more expensive, because of how expensive electricity is in the UK. And here I can try out all kinds of things. I just tried poutine, which I never had before. It's a Canadian fast food dish with fries, gravy, and cheese on top. It sounds strange, but it tastes really delicious. And if you're into football, you have to visit Anfield Stadium in Liverpool. I'm looking forward to next week because it's going to be more exciting as I travel across the country. Thank you so much for the support, and greetings from Liverpool.